Look closely at that tree from this view. Then think about the tree from this angle. Or this one. Well, what is this all about, Paul? We're talking about photography and angles. Hello, everybody. I'm Paul Yeager, and welcome to the MTOM Show podcast. And we are again in video, but this time it is a very descriptive video. So if you are listening in the audio version, hopefully we fill in enough holes for you to understand. But if you get a chance, go to the YouTube channel and watch this one in full video format. I am in a sunroom right here where I like to shoot and study and read a lot of the time, and I've taken a number of photos from here. So we're going to talk with Brian Abeling, and he is going to say it's not all about the fancy dancy camera. He does a lot of work with just a phone, and you can too. And we're going to discuss maybe just moving a foot or two forward, backward, up, down. Just look around to have your photos go from good to great. I know I always need a refresher on when I am taking images. So please enjoy this episode. This is a continued weekly look at what's interesting. And is this a stretch for agriculture? This one's more about rural issues today and how to make rural America look so much better. So enjoy this episode with Brian Abeling. This technology thing has really come to the forefront, Brian, in a short amount of time. You just said the dog. I mean, do you have the dog in the office, or are you in a home office right now?
Home right now.
But you've got a job at the school district. So were you able to work from home before all this COVID thing?
No, I was not able to work from home before. And as a general rule is if the teachers are at school, you're at school. That makes sense. That's really cut and dry, very easy. But there was a stretch during last spring and last summer where people were working from home and figuring that out.
So your day job is a technology guy, technology manager, supervisor. What do you give me your big fancy LinkedIn title?
Director of Technology is the official title. I serve for West Des Moines Schools, so I oversee the tech department, anything and everything to do with technology.
So is your background in education and you ended up in technology, or was your background in technology and you just happened to work for a school district?
Education. I was a 8th grade science teacher. Worked in Illinois for a few years, and right off the bat in that job moved into media specialist roles and things of that nature. Technology trainer, technology support, and technology supervisor, then director. That path.
And that's like the second largest school district of the state. Nothing major there. It's fine. It's the way it is, right? Number 2, West Des Moines, number 2?
No, probably not. I would guess Cedar Rapids, probably City, a few others, but certainly top 10, maybe somewhere in that. But decent sized school, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So Iowa native?
Actually, born in upstate New York. My dad worked for John Deere dealership in upstate New York, and so that means all roads lead to Iowa. So moved to Iowa, but really I would say I was born in upstate New York, but raised in Iowa. Grew up in Monticello, Iowa. Loved it there. Fantastic place. And so he worked for a dealership there for a number of years, and actually still resides there now.
So was that in the country then, or did you grow up in town?
In the country. So interesting thing is people would say, oh, so your dad worked for John Deere, but were you guys farmers? And it's like, well, I grew up on a farm, but we didn't farm. That's crazy. So, we had horses we took care of. We had sheep we took care of. We didn't have any crops. We rented out the grain bins. Equipment was running around all the time because you're renting the stuff out and the other facilities that are there. But with Dad at John Deere, most of his time was at John Deere, taking care of farmers in that area. So, but yeah, I grew up out in the country, kind of on a farm, but not a.
So you're on the farm. Was there ever a desire to work in agriculture?
Probably not. Dad put in a huge amount of hours watching Dad. When just the same, when you I've got lots of relatives now who are still out on the farm, especially in north central Iowa on my wife's side of the family. In the spring, they're out constantly. In the fall, it is nonstop. You see that. And then you see, when you work for John Deere, he's out on the road. It could be Sunday morning. They call and they need help. He had to go then. That was it. And so, yeah, I would say no, there probably wasn't much of an interest. But when I ended up choosing teaching, that was kind of an odd one for my family too. No one else is a teacher. How usually, there's usually like a ton of teachers in the family and it just goes generation to generation. Everyone else works in insurance and I work in education. I was the black sheep.
You sound like everybody else in Des Moines. I work in insurance.
Yeah,
We're the minority if we don't work in insurance in this town.
that's exactly what it was. Yeah.
Growing up in Monticello, that is one of the prettiest spots in the state of Iowa. Grant Wood painted not too terribly far from there, at least was inspired by there. Did that inspire you?
Yeah, it is beautiful there, especially a lot of places in eastern Iowa, a lot of places in northeast Iowa. So growing up in upstate New York, the closest thing to compare to upstate New York is probably Dubuque on up to Lansing, which you've probably driven the Great River Road there. That is fantastic. And we would go up there frequently. That's what reminded us of home, of upstate New York, being along the Mississippi. So yeah, actually that does. And uh, at least once a year, I'm up in Clayton, Alameda. I'm up in those areas doing photography. People are like, do you just keep going back there? It's like, yeah, I do. It's just, I can always find something new, even though I've been there every year consistently over time.
And when you say upstate New York, I mean, Albany, Schenectady, Syracuse, Buffalo, what are you talking here?
Between Syracuse and Schenectady.
Okay.
Mohawk Valley, that area.
Mm-hmm. My father actually was a bellhop for a summer in that area.
Oh, yeah.
At Mohawk, and he always talked about it. And at some point, I'm going to get up there and look. But that's interesting that you compare it between the two. I mean, you pay attention in this. I don't know if I want to call it side hustle, but this thing that you do, this great hobby, that's a little more than that. You certainly do pay attention to landscapes. Do you have that? Are you ever the passenger? And when you're driving in the car, say, "Oh, I need to stop there," or "Oh, I need to." Or are you the driver and you just pull the car off to the side of the road and try to keep it out of the ditch when you see something that you're like, "Hey, I need to go shoot that"?
Both. My wife would go, "Oh, both. Don't you dare lie. You're both." Yeah, it's both. And then she's very patient with it as well. She knows, especially it depends on the type of travel we're doing. If it's more of a leisure travel, she'll even stop and go. She can sense it. She can look and go, "Okay, that's pretty cool over there. You need to get out. You need to get out." I understand.
So she doesn't do anything to extinguish this passion of yours?
No,
she encourages you at times?
There's times when we'll travel together to go explore different things, but that's usually when we're going to visit like an event, whether it's restaurants or a community event or something along those lines. She'll want to go on those. If it is, I'm going out and I just need to go on this landscape binge and I'm just heading out doing early morning, late night shots, she's like, "Yeah, just go." just go take care of it.
Get that out of your system and go.
Yeah, just go.
When do you think that first struck? What's your first camera? When did you first start documenting what you see?
Oh, I would have been ninth grade, actually. Actually, in ninth grade, Halley's Comet came through, and actually, my first love came out of that was astronomy. So I was very interested in astronomy off the bat between around in ninth grade, and it didn't take much longer. Within that same year, I said, "Hey, I want to try to figure out how to capture this, what I'm seeing." And so then I was a Pentax K1000, so old film. And so I didn't even take photography as a course in high school. They had it. They kept telling me I should take it. Didn't. I just hung out in the dark room all the time, and I just kept trying to take pictures. And on the photography side, some people think that landscapes is harder than portraits or vice versa, but there's one thing that's clear: astrophotography is like the hard one. And I started there. And so nothing like learning how to take pictures in the middle of the night where you're learning the camera at the same time. But that's kind of where I started. And then worked my way into landscapes. And I really try to stay away from portraits for the most part. I get requests for it, but don't really do it.
"Oh, Brian, take my senior photos or take our family pictures." And you're like, "Yeah, no, there's a comet going through or there's an eclipse that I want to go get that day."
Yeah, and I do. I turn it down because there's lots of other people who are fantastic at doing it, and I'll refer them to them. And so, I'll do a few occasionally for family members, things like that. But then, yeah, it's one of those things. Once you start, then you're going to keep it up, and people are going to keep expecting it. And It's like, no, as you said, it's a side hustle, kind of a side passion. So I shoot what I want when I want for the most part. But over the last few years, then people have come back in and say, "Hey, now that you've got this collection, how can I get access to this material or that?"
So you and I are relatively close in age. We didn't have digital cameras growing up. I knew the farm had great images. I have them locked into my mind. Now you can pull out your phone and get these shots. Have you found, I've returned, it was going through some files here recently. I found something through a 2004 project I did. I went to the farm every month. I was living 2 hours away, and I tried to document something for a family calendar. I found these images that I just hadn't noticed before. Did you have that after you started taking photos, after ninth grade, 10th grade, when you were in college and adult life, wanting to return to the farm to capture things that maybe you'd missed?
Yeah, actually, and in Blairsburg, my wife's family's from Blairsburg, Webster City area. The family farm is still there. It's almost a century farm. Randy and Sandra Groof run it up in Blairsburg, and they will call for different things like, hey, we're getting ready to run the harvester. Or recently it was, hey, we're taking down this corn crib, but it was your great grandfather who built it in the early 20s. So we go out and we document it before it gets, it's seen its day. It needs to come down. So yeah, we're still back out on her family farm, as it would be, out still capturing history and events and things of that nature. Absolutely.
You can't shake it. It's always good to have a home turf to operate out of. And that,
It is.
this would be a really good spot in September or October, just maybe not in June. You kind of know those things.
Yeah, yep.
I followed you on a number of mediums for a long time, Brian, and I'll see your items show up on the local news in Des Moines. Instagram is the photo haven, but that's not necessarily your favorite one of the social medias to use. Which one do you like best for photography?
I really fell in love with Instagram and really ran with it for quite a while. Once it was bought by Facebook, then the algorithms changed, and then it just came to a grinding halt. That became work. At that same moment in time, Facebook actually took off. So I really just kind of ran with Facebook. I still run both of them for now. I probably give more attention to Facebook for the most part. Although, to be honest, I've kind of moved into a phase where I'm coming back to where I'm spending more time on where do I go with photograph and what do I spend my time on, and then less on social media, and the posts are more automated so that there's stuff going out all the time. But I try not to, when I post stuff, I actually will not read the comments even. I've given up on reading the comments. Like, hey, if you like it, great. If you don't, move on. It's okay.
There's other parts of the internet. That's good to know. But I've looked at all your stuff, and certain barns and certain landscapes have kind of gotten my attention. What I want to do is I want you to help me and help others take better photos. I mean, let's face it. I mean, you see people who, and you're not going to solve all of our problems that we're maybe in the wrong spot or we're not thinking the right thing, but you've put together a little bit of a slideshow, and darn it, you're a teacher, so you're going to help educate us a little bit here today, Brian. So for those that are watching on YouTube here, you're going to be able to see the change that's going on. If you're listening to this podcast, you're going to now go, well, where did they go and what are they describing? But Brian's now in front of a big white screen, and we're just going to go through some of these photos. What do you want to start with?
Let's get started with a quick overview of what we're going to cover, actually. So really, there's one thing I'll probably hit over and over again. It's that top section, which is move your feet, then move your camera. It's amazing. We all do it. We all get to a spot, we get out and we take a look at it, and then we try to capture the photo, and that's it. So then you need to move a little bit to keep getting different angles, and I'll show you why here in a second. And really, the bottom three help explain why. You're trying to either isolate the photo, you're trying to make sure there's something in the foreground and the background, front back type picture, or you're looking for something called leading lines. So these are three different strategies. What I'm going to do is show you some examples of each and how you can get there to each one. So let's start. This
looks like a simple corn crib maybe out. It doesn't look like the farmstead is gone. And this is something you'll see anywhere. I've seen these pictures in Kansas and Iowa. This isn't isolated just to Iowa.
Nope. So in this case, it's just a relatively simple picture because you focused in on either the crib or perhaps the waves of snow up in the front. So now what I'm going to do is, instead of just talking about the final photo, let's take you through a sequence of what happens when I parked the car, got out, and what happened all the way leading towards this and the thought behind it. So that helps you learn why you need to move your feet and what you're trying to do when you isolate something. So here's the first example: is I get out of the car. And I stand right next to the car because everybody does it. You stand right next to the car, you pull the camera up to your face and you go ahead and take the first picture, and here it is. It's okay. But what gets my attention is the fact that this front section has a bunch of waves of snow, which is good. The crib is there, but you'll also notice that there's stuff on the horizon, both on the right and left side of the crib. To me, I'll look at that and notice and say, okay, it'd be nice if I could get some of that stuff out. So the idea of isolating the picture means you're isolating or focusing on what you want to show, what the subject is. So, and this is okay photo. So as I said, you take this photo and then you move on. What I'm going to do is I'm going to move to the right of this photo. So if I'm standing here, I'm moving over this direction in the photo to get a different view. And so if I move now, I'm directly in front of the corn crib.
And you've gone and cut out everything that was on the horizon. You appear to maybe be lower. Are you still in a public place? I guess I should ask that too.
Yes, absolutely. Because you'll notice in this sequence is I am still on the road, and I've just started on one side and I have basically walked up the other. I'm not going to walk around the object because I don't relate it to their property. So I'm going to stay on the road, but I'm just going to walk from one side to the other. So you'll notice that we saw the corn crib from one angle. Now we're looking at it straight on. Now you're right. A perfect observation was that I got a little bit lower. So we didn't shoot at shoulder height. I got a little bit lower so I could remove that stuff on the horizon. But now I noticed I also picked this place where the front of the front in front of the crib here, this stuff is the waves aren't, and the snow isn't quite as interesting to me anyway. It's a little more flat. Plus the crib itself is really flat looking because it's straight on, and that's okay. So I just take the shot and I move on, keep walking a few steps more in the same direction. Now, I like this angle when I first got to it and said, hey, this looks all right. But now I still got a couple of issues. This clutter that's like behind my head right now, this clutter that's here, plus the stuff on the horizon popped back into play. So in order to isolate this more, what we're going to do is we're going to flip the camera. And so instead of shooting in landscape mode, we're going to flip it and shoot portrait. And when we shoot it in portrait, then we can also move down a little bit. In other words, just crouch down just a little bit to be able to get the stuff off the horizon. And what will happen is we end up with this. So you can see that's not much of a jump from there. It basically is about the same shot. I've just decided that I'm going to isolate out the stuff off the horizon and clear the other stuff out off the right. And that's how I ended that picture.
Now, again, you're a science teacher by trade. You were not a photographer by trade. Did you take at some point photography classes, or how did you pick up some of these skills?
I did take a few random classes. They're like group instruction from a few different landscape photographers along the way. And, they'll have like a one-day little workshop type thing, but that's the extent of it. Not really a formal class. A lot of stuff learning online, and a lot of stuff just learning by trial and error. A number of years ago, I used to take my camera with me on every vacation, and I was a nut on vacation. I would rack up thousands of photos of stuff, but it was never in the state of Iowa. It's always someplace else. So I always had that feeling of, hey, you got to wait till you go someplace exotic to take your camera. And then after a while, it was like, oh no, I should practice more often at home. And then it's like, hey, then I started to discover, hey, there's all this really great stuff that's close to home that really is pretty good. And so then I've been traveling more and more actually in the state than I have been out of the state to collect up all these great little gems that every little Midwest state has.
And that is something that we all see. And I'm always torn on a photo to, yes, get the shot that everybody sees when they first get out of the car or they see it going by. But I do try to move, in videography, it's kind of the same thing. Shoot and move, shoot and move, shoot and move. That's
Yep.
the tripod and the camera. Like, yes, you can zoom in on some things, but get closer or go 5 feet to your right. It just looks different enough. And it's not just rural images. There's also state parks. We might go and have these wonderful lookout views. You mentioned around the Great River Road in Northeast Iowa. And this is an area that I know a lot of people like to take good photos from. So I want to know, Brian, show me what you've taken, but show me how I can make something look a little better than the average photo.
Sure. Let's head up Northeast Iowa. We're heading to Pikes Peak State Park. This is out just south of McGregor, Iowa, Clayton County, along the Mississippi River. And so here's a final example we'll show. This is an overlook or observation deck that is 500 feet over top of the Mississippi River Valley. And off in the distance is Wisconsin, and the Wisconsin River is emptying out into the Mississippi at this location. And what you and I and everyone else does when you get to this location is you do exactly what those two people do, which is fine. You walk up to the rail. That's what you're supposed to do. You walk up to the rail, you check out the view. Of course, you also pull out your camera and then you take this shot. This is the view. This is it. That's okay. That's what it is. It's really cool. Now, this isn't panoramic, so I'm not seeing the whole wide scape of the view, but this is the shot you're going to get when you walk up there. So as I said, you need to keep moving and keep walking around. What I like to do with these observation decks, places like this, you can't walk forward, of course. You're going to go off the cliff. So you need to walk backwards, and you need to walk in different areas around. So let's take a look at what happens if we back up a few feet. If we now back up a few feet, we now have something in the front, in the foreground to catch your interest, and something in the back. It helps show scale of what's going on. It shows the overview of where you're at. So I tend to like this shot better than the last one. There's nothing wrong with the last one in terms of, it still shows the view, but in this one, we still get we get an idea of what it's like to be there. It's a little bit closer of what that's like. But then, this is just the first one. So in this case, I would still encourage to keep walking back and keep moving. So in this case, I step back even a little bit further. Now, a second ago, now that I can see up in front here, you'll notice that a second ago, the last shot was taken up in this area up where this little bench was, those wooden benches. I actually went to the wooden bench and I stood on top of the bench, and then I lifted the camera up over my head and angled it down because I wanted to make sure that I was getting as much of the view as I could. So in this case, you'll also notice that there's the cement barrier that's back here, back on the side. Back that's over there. And so what I've done is I backed up even further. I'm now standing on that concrete ledge, again with the camera up, pointing down. And so this is what that view looks like now. So then I decide, well, I'm going to shift to my left then and come around. And so then the next view shows the overall observation deck. Yeah. I went ahead and grabbed the trees because in this case, if the clouds aren't interesting, we'll go ahead and throw the trees inside of there. And then the very last step is, this is a great shot by itself. I like this one. But if you also wait for somebody to come by, then you could, people will automatically, as you said, come up and stand right by the rail and take in the view.
Okay, so when you started this image, Brian, you had it called front back. I call it foreground background. I think that's kind of the same language. All right.
Absolutely.
This over the top with the trees that you have, the branches, again, it provides a depth and greater sense of maybe you don't need the panoramic to show how wide this shot is because we find out it's a small area. It looks big. It's got a great view, but sometimes paying attention to the wider view from a close-up spot, if that makes any sense, gives you a better perspective. So I want to ask you, last thing that's always kind of debate in our house sometimes is people in, people out. They're not models. They're not posing. They're not hamming for the camera. You like having people in shots like this or out?
Depends what I'm shooting for. So in the last few years, I've done more newspaper and magazine type work. So they're editorial rights, not advertising rights. They would like to see people in the shot, but they also don't always want faces to be seen. So this fits that description for that type of shot. Now, I also, you'll notice, took the same shot without people in it because I might want for myself basic landscapes that other travel and tourism some travel and tourism groups want people in it, and some would prefer to have the open landscape with the empty bench. It's a matter of preference. So you'll find that I shoot both.
All right, I've got the family with me, and I want to get my kids in this shot. Where should I put them to get the best photo to show them and the best experience? Because I know that's a whole different layer.
Well, you shouldn't ask that question. I don't do portraits, you said. No.
True. Portraits, it's not. Yes, I got it.
But in this case, you're going to try to line up the view. I think what's interesting is if you are already working the area and figuring out these shots, and if you decide you like this shot or you like this other one back here or this other one here, you can still get them near the bench or on the benches. I probably wouldn't place them at the rail. It's probably too far away. That way you can still show them. But you could also go back to this first shot and say, hey, this was a little bit closer up. And in this case, you have them up by the rail enjoying the view, or have them staged because they certainly could be up on the left-hand side of that photo. But I think if you follow the same concepts of trying to figure out what you want the photo to look like, and then look at the shot you've got on your phone or your camera and say, all right, now where do I need to place you?
All right, so let's go to, not your next photo, but let's go, we all go to the Black Hills and we go to Mount Rushmore. And there is a visitor center there. Lots of people, lots of flags, lots of color, lots of people getting in the way. And then you go all the way up to the front of the monument where it's the rail and it's just the image of the presidents behind me. Again, this isn't a portrait question, family photo question. Do you like the photo better with nobody else in it than just the presidents? Or, I mean, I've taken them both.
Yeah,
Put the kids in front. I mean, and that's the same case because I have some cool shots of my kids from a profile at a big event like this and not the front of their face.
Yeah, most of my, I like them both as well, but you're right along the lines there. Like when I think back to my favorite photos of my kids, it's usually candids that weren't posed, weren't set. Those are usually the things. So if I can get them in front of it and I can sense the awe that they're feeling by seeing something like that, that's probably more impactful to me.
Good point. All right. A couple of good basics here. What do we got next?
Oh,
yes.
The leading lines. This one, of course, is a gimme, though, because if you were driving down Highway 17 near Boone, Iowa, and saw this church sitting there and the crops lined right up to it in the spring, you'd go, wow, that's exactly what they always talked about with leading lines. Now I understand. And sometimes you have to we'll do some other examples, though. Sometimes you have to get a bit more creative in terms of finding the lines. But it's a simple idea that a line in the photo can draw your eye into the photo so that you'll look at what's going on in the front and look into the background. So, of course, really easy example, but the thing about leading lines for me is they don't always have to be straight in like this. Even though this is a wonderful example, I like this, the shot I really preferred was probably 20 yards to the left of this. So you can see that there's like some ripples in the middle of the photo there where there's probably some little hills, and you move over 20 feet from it. And I like this one just as much, if not better than the other, as now we get those little waving, rolling hills with the lines leading still up to the church. So just again, even when you find the lines, it's still okay to keep moving and keep checking it out from the left, from the right, whatever angle you can.
Both shots give a sense of the hill, but for whatever reason, the way the eye and the lines work 20 feet from the side makes a whole different photo. Yeah, that is really neat.
Yeah. Same with some of those other earlier examples, that the corn crib shots, that was inches in some cases to get the stuff off the horizon. Yep. I didn't have to lay on the ground. It just had to come down about 10, 12 inches.
What about if I was at the edge, say I was in the edge of this field. So if I'm talking to someone who's a producer in the middle of a corn or a soybean field, what about getting down on my hands and knees, get low and put that corn in the front over the waves and the church in the background?
Yeah, actually, I like that as well. It's just in this particular case, I wasn't able to because of where the property line is and where stuff is at. But yes, if you're right, if I was heading back up to Blairsburg and I'm heading up to a place where I'm going to be okay with, I'm going to be, or got permission, then I'm going to go ahead and, yeah, in this case, it would be really incredible shot to be down low, have something even focused and zoomed in on the crop itself.
Yeah.
Then you could see the church off into the background would be fantastic. Yeah.
All right. I love the lines. We've talked foreground, front and back, and now lines. What else is in our lesson today?
Actually, there's just more examples of the same is really what we're after in this case, is just keep talking about different ways. So in this case, this is up in Dubuque. This is taken with a drone though. So this is not a place where you can stand to get the shot, but you can basically see that there's this trail leading up through the middle of the photo. Then there's the bluff also creates a line, as well as the river. They all create lines that kind of lead towards where that barge is at. And so as I said, anytime you can get lines or multiple lines leading into the photo, that creates and makes it more impactful. We'll head back to Pikes Peak State Park. We were just there a second ago in that last overlook. So this is the boardwalk path that heads down towards Bridal Veil Falls. And if you're looking for lines, sometimes the lines are just there for you, and sometimes you have to create them. This one, you can kind of create it because we're just using the boardwalk on that rail. That kind of sucks you in and draws you into the person, which is me, because a lot of times I'll just set the thing up on a tripod and then I'll go in to add that point of interest inside of there. So it's just use the things that are there to help create that create that leading line.
Is that considered a portrait? Is that a self-portrait?
It is a selfie. Yes, it is.
I like both of those. And the drone shot, I mean, I've seen lots of great images on a farm over the top or on the water and things like that. At some point, what's the difference between a good shot and a great shot when it comes to a drone? Because the perspective is something that we don't normally get. Do you have other drone shots there that you were going to get to, or did I steal all your thunder already?
No, I do actually. I've got a few more coming up here. Just one more quick point on this one, this leading line. I really do like lines from corners. You'll probably see that over time. So I purposely picked to put this rail and this boardwalk on a corner of the photo so that it draws you from the corner on in. Those just tend to be ones that I seem to prefer. Bridges are also decent for lines. This is an astrophotography example though, because then you got all these lines coming up over as well as from the side, and they come up in. It's one of these really old bridges with a wooden plank. The whole thing shakes as you drive across it. Wonderful bridge. Fantastic. If you don't mind that the board creaks as you drive across. This is back to astrophotography examples for front and back. So that's actually me and my nephew were out watching for Perseid meteors. And so instead of just focusing on stars, I like to always mix it with something in the foreground so that you can kind of tell that there's something else going on. So there's just two people sitting on a rail as the meteor heads by. We're up in Blairsburg, up on the family farm up there where there was northern lights one night. And so this is a case in the front and back. Sometimes we're trying to add to the photo rather than like the isolation you're taking away. So in this case, you could just shoot a picture of northern lights. That would be beautiful. But then we're like, okay, we need something. Well, if you're in Blairsburg, it's really easy to go grab a wind turbine, make sure that's inside the photo, and then as well grab a person as well. So we're kind of just adding to it.
And then is this let's go back to the Blairsburg shot. Is that an overexposed or longer than a standard? Is that
because it's astrophotography, what happens is the photo for the background for the stars is probably in this case only about 15 seconds or so. But he had to stand still, not for the full 15 seconds. What happens is you can see his shadow down in the front there. We popped a flash off on the side. So you just pop a flash, which will light him up. So it's all done in a 15-second exposure, but yet the camera's not going to catch him as long as he doesn't jump around all over the place. If he stands still for the time frame, the flash goes off.
Yeah.
Actually, the flash is what froze the wind turbine blades as well.
Okay, because was the wind turbine was moving?
Yeah, it was moving. Yeah.
Wow,
but
cool.
The flash was enough to pop and grab it. We did some test shots and found that it froze it. And that's when we said, oh, now we got that. Now we need to add you and keep adding to it.
All right. Now you can go back to St. Donatus. Oh, I love St. Donatus.
Yeah. And this another quick example of front and back, although it can show you as well that sometimes front and back and foreground and background shots can get very complicated because this one just has a lot going on. Because of the tree, the rolling hills in the background, the steeple, but it's a beautiful area. But it's another case of, we could have just shot the rolling hills, but it was nice to add the steeple, add the tree, add something in the front for it as well. So then you were asking about other drone shots, and drones for me, isolation shots are really pretty good for those because it's good to be able to isolate something. Crawford County, you're heading towards Mapleton, I think west in towards Mapleton. And this barn, and they maximize every inch they can on this field, which is fantastic. And so getting the drone up in the air and then just catch the patterns of the crop lines throughout there and get it isolated. Another example that sadly is not around anymore. This one is near Mount Vernon. The derecho took this barn down. Was probably one of my favorites that I always drove by when I was in the area. But just another quick example of, you could catch it so that you could show the background and the horizon. I tend to like to show it out there by itself, nothing else. But the drone allows you and gives you that ability to get these angles, whereas on foot, you're a little more limited as to what you can grab. Another quick example of just getting things by themselves to keep the shot simple. This is up in Delaware County, middle of the night. If you just happen to be passing by and found a tree that's just by itself.
Whoa. Middle of the night?
Oh, yeah.
So what's the exposure time on this?
This is probably 20 seconds. Yeah, most of the astrophotography stuff is usually about 20 to 25 seconds. If you go past 30 seconds, the stars will blur and will start to move. because the Earth's turning, and so that'll make the stars appear that they're moving. So most of these shots are on a tripod. They're 20 to 25 seconds. So in other words, that's all you've got. The shot that was back there a second ago, the Landis Road Bridge, and it had the words Iowa written in there. That's done with a flashlight. It means I have 20 seconds to take a flashlight and spell out Iowa backwards really fast.
Good thing you weren't in Mississippi for that one. I don't know if you would have made it.
No, my kids are absolutely great at spelling things backwards. They love to do the light painting, it's called. You're out, and we of course get the photo set up, get everything right as you want, and then add something like add the word Iowa or have them add their name, things of that nature.
All right, Delaware County. Okay. Again, this is another drone shot, and I did ask earlier about what makes a good or better drone shot, because you talked a moment ago about the isolation. This is a pretty isolated photo of the Clark Tower, but it also, to me, appears fairly wide in perspective. Define the two.
It is. Well, the difference between the two, I don't know. The drone will do well for all of these cases. I mean, we can get down and zoom in on it. We can go do wide. If you widen out here, you'll see the rolling hills along Winterset and see the town in the background, actually, because it's just not far from town. And I've got some of those same shots as well. I just seem to like the one where everything is pretty consistent, except for one thing stands out. And if one thing stands out like this, I think that's kind of impactful. The drone also allows the bird's eye view, the straight down. It's usually pretty good as well. People will sometimes take to those. I think the novelty's starting to wear off in the bird's eye shot, though, but it's still fairly popular because people will look at it and go, I think that's Clark Tower, but I'm not sure, because you're not used to looking at it straight down.
And is that a road or a creek that goes around there? I'm not familiar enough with Clark Tower to know.
That's a road. There's a one-way road. This is in, they have Winterset City Park. They have a path that is one way that leads from the park out to this tower and then comes back to the park. And so it's one way, and it's just a road. During the winter, it's actually closed. So I had to go outside the park and then send the drone in to be able to get the winter shot because the road's still closed.
All right. We've got about 5 to 10 minutes left, Brian. I don't want to cut you short, or we can go about that long. Is there other images you want to show us? Or have I taken all the tricks out of your, if you want to learn more about Brian's work, there's several different ways to do it. And there's also several different projects that you can be a part of. There's always, I love a good calendar, a good photo calendar. And I know you've got lots of things like that.
Yeah, I've done some calendars over the years, but as I said, most of the time I sell the digital stuff, mostly to magazines, travel and tourism groups, but I'm also working on a few books, putting together particularly the drone photos and other things. I had a lot of people say I want a coffee table book, and so I'm kind of on production. I got 3 of those going right now, and hopefully those will be out here soon in the next month or so. But otherwise, this is just quick shameless promotion for Abeling Photo on Facebook and Instagram, and also there's another site called Iowa Road Trip. What happened was Abeling Photo got to the point to where people kept saying over and over again, they would post on every photo and they would say, they would tag their friend and they would say, road trip, we need to go here. So after a while, I'm like, you guys are giving it to me. You're handing it to me. So I had to make Iowa Road Trip just to share off places specifically within Iowa. But yeah, there's some extra photos up on the deck that are here that this is Motor Mill, Elkader, Iowa.
I was just going to say, if I had to bet, that's Elkader. It is.
Yeah, it is. It's another beautiful location. Examples I like about this is you're using all these lines from the bridge to come in and point across. In this case, I chose to get relatively low versus getting higher anyway. What's also interesting about this, people always ask, like, hey, what camera equipment do you use? And my answer is I use any camera I can get my hands on. This photo was taken with an iPhone 6.
Yeah. Wow.
It landed on the cover of a magazine. So it does not matter. You do not, it's always fun to go buy new toys, but I have to come back and remind myself, hey, I can use my old iPhone and I can get a photo on the cover of a magazine. It's going to be okay. It's more about where you place the camera than about what camera you have.
Fundamentals, as we would say in sports or in work. So, all right, Brian, I appreciate your time here. It is always fun to learn. I just love looking at the photos. I know we put a lot in our I like to share from Instagram feeds of others, and there's some great people out there. I asked Joe Murphy this, who works for the Iowa Soybean Association. I said, all right, you get lost quite often in the state. You have to pick a child here. What are 2 or 3 places you really love to shoot in the state of Iowa?
Yay. Man, there's a ton of them.
I mean, it can be city, and that's okay if it's a metro location.
No. It's just, you're right. It's picking a child here. But really, I'll go to Maquoketa Caves first, because I was raised in Monticello. It was nearby there. So Maquoketa Caves is one of those unique places that I have been there in the middle of the winter. I've been there in the spring, in the summer, in the fall. I've been there every season for photos. And so I've been able to see the whole place work its way through the seasons. And so that I enjoy. I really love that, because that gives me a different aspect of being able to be in the same place at different times. Anywhere in Northeast Iowa is also awesome. Anywhere from Dubuque all the way on up, as well as Decorah, the whole area is just a gem. As I said, I go back there every year to spend at least 3-4 days just wandering around, find new places to go. But I also like the Les Hills, though. Les Hills are also very intriguing. Finding new spots in there as well as the back roads in Les Hills are fantastic. I also really like doing photography in those. Where you've probably seen those shots where you're heading through a dirt road, and the walls on the side are 30-some feet tall, and there's barely room for one car to get through, and the roads aren't maintained. Those are a blast to find and explore.
And I guess that was one of the points we had talked about when we first tried setting this up, was the project that Iowa PBS had done, where we did fly all over the state. And the Les Hills, when you have when the executive producer of the program is from Council Bluffs, of course he's going to feature the Les Hills quite often, and Andrew Bott has done that. And I keep thinking Andrew's got to be a guest on this, and maybe I'll just have to have him fly me through various places, and we'll go with it that way. But there's even in the regular flat or not as exciting, there's still beauty to be found. It doesn't have to be a great location.
Yeah, absolutely. We've found places all over. I usually travel about 60 to 70 counties per year. It's taken me a few years to get all 99 actually done, to make sure I've got all covered. But yeah, every one of them, all 99, everybody's got something unique, and we've hit stuff everywhere as we've hit it out there to fill out stuff for Iowa Road Trip.
All right. Brian, I appreciate your time. Brian Abeling of West Des Moines, Iowa. Thank you so much. Great to see all of your work, and thanks for helping us make our photos better.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Enjoyed it.
My thanks to Brian Abeling for his time today of West Des Moines, Iowa. Hope you enjoyed it, and maybe go back and look at some of his images that he promoted on the back end of our discussion. We will see you again next Tuesday. Thank you so very much for subscribing, either in audio or video form. Go to our YouTube channel of Market to Market, and you can be notified anytime we post a new video. We'd love to have you. And also, by the way, we have some pretty cool thank you gifts coming your way very, very soon. So stay tuned to all of our channels to keep in the know about what's happening. Thank you, and have a great week.